Hey everyone, welcome to Rate My Roster Change. I asked people on Twitter this morning to pitch a one-player change for an LCS team, and then I would react to it with a combination of how good of a move I think it would be, and also how likely I think it is to actually happen in this upcoming mid-season break. So we're going to go through some of those. I got a ton of them. I cut it off after about half an hour and said, hey, I'm not going to be looking at these anymore. I have to pick a bunch and go ahead and make the video. But there are a lot more. You can look that up on Twitter and kind of see what else people suggested there and engage in a discussion of it yourself. And I'm not going to be reacting to all the ones I got in that first half hour. There are just too many. So I picked a bunch that I think are kind of the most interesting or that more than one person suggested. And let's go through them and let's talk about them. So we'll start with the team that I think most people look at and go, okay, there's going to be something big going on. There's going to be a bunch of changes. And that's TSM. And the first one I want to look at is it's based on a rumor that I think came about because of a video Doinby made or something that he said in his stream. And that is the suggestion of Bo, the Chinese jungler, joining TSM. And so I'm going to engage with this one in a little more depth than I might on some of the others, but I want to say, like, okay, Bo is a great player from what we have seen of him, and we haven't seen him in a while now. There's a lot of context around this where there was a big match fixing scandal, and Bo was part of it. He wasn't one of the forefront members of it, from what I understand, but he was involved. He kind of from what I remember, he kind of confessed to his involvement, but and he's eligible to play again. There was a suspension, but the culture around this in China and in Korea is much more intense than it is in the Western world. So he's not playing, and it's very unlikely that he'll ever play in China or Korea. So, of course, there's a lot of talk about, hey, great player, someone from the West should pick him up. You don't overlook this level of skill, right, when it's there. But the degree of hyperbole I see around him is really intense. People talk about Bo. Bo fans talk about Bo as if he's Faker 2.0 and like a guaranteed, next GOAT kind of a player, and it's just too much. He is a great player, but I don't think this is something that you sacrifice your entire organization's future or like mortgage everything to pick up. You got to be careful about it and treat it with some, put some realism glasses on it. I also want to make the comment just in brief that I'm not sure that FPX, obviously they want to move him and get some value out of this asset. They know what he's worth in terms of his quality as a player and his skill level and all that. I'm not sure if they're willing to make a legitimate straight up sale. Hey, you now belong to that team and our hands are washed of you. I'm not going to go into it, but that's a factor in why I see this as a very low likelihood move, whether it's to TSM or anyone else in the LCS. I'm going to rate the quality and the likelihood of these moves on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 the lowest, 5 the highest. I think the likelihood of Bo joining TSM is a 1. I think the likelihood of Bo joining any other team in the LCS is a 1. The quality of the move for TSM, as long as they have Spica around, which they do for at least another split, it doesn't really make sense. And bringing in Bo would basically be saying, we have to sell Spica now to get some money to fund this, and Spica will never be part of our team again. So I would call it like a 2 out of 5 quality. Hey, Bo's a great player. If you could get him for a cost that made sense and with no weird strings attached then maybe. But I don't think it's a move that would make sense for TSM or for anyone else in the LCS unless the numbers really made sense and everything was clean and above board. But let's move on to some other things around TSM, and I got a bunch of things around different mid lane options. So one of them being Copy. Try to buy out Copy from Cloud9 Academy. To me, this doesn't feel like a TSM move, going for somebody who's been built up inside another org and then like promoting him into the LCS, buying him out of an academy team of another org and promoting him for LCS. I think he's got some upside. I would call this like a 3 out of 5 quality move. I think it would be pretty good to get some domestic youth and a guy who has shown like, yeah, there could be something here that you could play with. But going into the summer split, going into a summer split with Worlds in NA, and you want to give yourself, if there's any way you can give yourself a chance to possibly still get to Worlds, I don't think Copy is it. I don't think it's a big enough swing for that. And it just doesn't feel like the right thing. I'd call it a likelihood 1, but a quality kind of 3. I think it would actually be kind of smart and look longer term. Pretty going to TSM, buying him from Immortals Academy is another one that was suggested. I think it's very unlikely that TSM have any interest in Pretty. It would be kind of like the copy move, cheaper, less long-term future upside. I think TSM are going to go, they're going to want to swing bigger or go younger. So I think it'd be like a 2 out of 5 quality move for them, because I think they should either swing bigger for like a big free agent or a big buyout, or they should go younger. And it's a zero likelihood this would never happen. Jensen to TSM naturally has come up, and I think people have been talking about this for weeks and weeks. Definitely an option. I think this would be one that TSM would look at and say, hey, we were trending up at the end of the split. Obviously something, wasn't clicking on our mid lane front. Not sure what we're going to do with Shenyi at support, whether we keep him or do something else. But if we can anchor down our mid lane and make that just a lot more reliable, we still think the rest of our pieces are good with Spica, Tactical, Huhi. I think this would be like a 3 out of 5 quality move. It's kind of the obvious move. I think it could do what they want it to do. And the likelihood of it, I think it's also about a 3 out of 5. Like this could definitely happen. It would kind of be the default move based on the other options they've explored and whether those options tend to pan out. And then another mid lane option that was suggested would be Maple to TSM. Now, this could fit kind of one of the MOs that TSM has used in the past few years, which, like the Sword Art move, bringing in players whose value is either kind of peaking or just starting to pass its peak in the LPL. He's probably available. He only played a third as many games for Anyone's Legend as Forge, the other mid laner, did. He hasn't played since January 25th, so they made a change, said, oh, we're going to play Forge instead of Maple. He only went 2-8 in the 10 games he played in January. I haven't gone and watched his games, but a brief glance at kind of the data suggests that he wasn't playing that well. I'm not sure if this would be a great move. Maple is a player with a lot of legacy, a player who might be better than Jensen right now. I don't know. He might not. Presumably, they would have watched his play, maybe looked at what he's doing in solo queue, and made that up for themselves. But I think it's a similar move to Jensen, but of course it's an import, and I think there'd be more risk involved. So I'd call it, if I'm giving the Jensen move a quality of, and maybe I'm being too low on the Jensen move, I'm going to revise that backwards. I'm going to say the Jensen move would be a 4 out of 5 quality, and the Maple move would be a 3 out of 5 quality. I think it's not bad if they go for that. It depends on what it costs and all that kind of stuff too. Could change that. The likelihood, I'll call that a 3 as well. I think it's one that I find it pretty believable that they would look at that, but I'm not sure. I would have to dedicate a separate video to this move on whether or not I think it's good, and go and actually do a bunch of VOD review of him and stuff, and then decide from there. But it's an interesting one to think about. Let's move on to Cloud9, because obviously a lot of interesting stuff came through with Cloud9 as well, with them failing to make it to Houston, finishing 4th. Some things clearly not going well behind the scenes. People want some changes. One of the places people are looking for change is at support. And of course, that's the place where they did demote Winsome, promote Isles, won a series, but couldn't make it as far as they wanted. So somebody, you're bound to get a suggestion. What if they brought in Core JJ? Of course, this would be a 5 out of 5 quality move. He's the most valuable player, potentially, arguably maybe, but not that arguably in the LCS right now. So that'd be a 5 out of 5 quality move, but it's a 0 out of 5 likelihood to happen. Team Liquid was never going to give him up mid-season. Maybe you look at the off-season and say everything changes and maybe Core JJ becomes available, but we're not looking at November right now. We'll circle back to the support position in a second, but there were a couple of mid-lane suggestions as well, and whether or not it was specified in the tweet, I think people are looking at this as you replace the mid laner and you promote Fudge to top. I'm inferring that from other conversation and from kind of the way people are presenting this. But so I don't think people are looking to replace Fudge. They're looking to replace Summit, swap Fudge back to the top lane and bring in a mid laner. If that's not the case, that does change the equation a little bit. But regardless, that's kind of the light that I'm using to shine on these moves and interpret them. So one is going for either Jensen or Niski. These are kind of the two very veteran options that are kind of known. They both have some history with Cloud9, history in the LCS, of course, and Niski back and forth LCS, LEC, and sat out in spring. Both of them sat out in spring. The Jensen move, so I would like the Niski move a little bit more, and this is assuming that you have to swap Fudge back to top lane so that you open up the import slot of Summit, and then you'd be able to import Niski. I would call that a 4 out of 5 quality move. I think obviously you know what Niski and Blabber can do together. He's a great player. I think it would be overall an upgrade for the team, even though I believe Summit is a more skilled player than Fudge. You also know, I think you have a little bit more evidence that Fudge knows how to play within the way Cloud9 have wanted to play in the past from summer last year. The way he works with Blabber and things like that. The Jensen move could have worked out well too. I would call that probably a 3 out of 5. I don't think it would really upgrade the team. I don't think it would necessarily downgrade the team, but maybe it would bring enough of a different look if it was like a Fudge, Blabber, Jensen topside. I think that might be a little better than what they have now, purely on like if the synergy and communication would work out better. But I don't think it's a sure thing to be better than what they had this split. The likelihood of them bringing in Jensen, I think, is a 1 out of 5. I really don't think this is something that Cloud9's going to do. On the Niski front, maybe. I still lean towards it not happening because I think Niski is probably going to be talking to a bunch of different teams about what the possibilities might be, and he'll be the one choosing. And given the history of what happened in October, November between him and Cloud9 and them going a different direction, I kind of feel like Niski might want to do something else, but I might be totally wrong on that. I'm just speculating. I'll give it like a 2.5 likelihood that Niski would go back to C9. On a similar but very different end of the scale front to Core JJ joining Cloud9, there's also a suggestion that Cloud9 should pick up Jojopyun. I would also consider this, and big surprise, I'm a huge fan of Jojopyun, have been singing his praises for a long time. I would call this a 5 out of 5 move, because adding this kind of domestic upcoming talent to your roster is good for anybody, pretty much. There are very narrow circumstances where maybe you wouldn't want to go for the first year player, but this is a player that every org should want in their future. The likelihood of it happening is a 1. I think they would have to make this enormous money offer, and EG would probably still say no. So it's just something you throw out there and go, yeah, but that's not going to happen. Now, circling back on the support front, and this is a bit of a double-barreled thing so 2 separate people suggested the idea of Cloud9 picking up Huhi from 100 Thieves, and one of them added the second barrel of specifying that 100 Thieves would then promote Busio. Whereas the other one said they weren't really thinking about what 100 Thieves would do from it. But I think this would be kind of a natural progression for anybody thinking about Huhi leaving 100 Thieves. So let's talk about the Cloud9 front first. We've been talking about Cloud9 in general. This would be probably a good move for the Cloud9 support position. If you just take Huhi's individual skill, I think he's one of the better supports in the LCS. I think he does a lot of really interesting things. He has his own take on it. He can play a lot of different styles, and he's been doing it for a while now. He's not a second-year player who you're not sure if you're going to continue the performance and how well he'll be able to adapt to different metas and so on. Like, I think you know what you're getting out of Huhi, and it's pretty good. You layer in the fact that he's going to be such a great translator between English and Korean, and that would bring some comfort level for Berserker. Maybe Huhi is going to be able to come in and lead the 2v2 decision making with Berserker and allow Berserker just to play a more pure mechanics game. That could be a really good fit for Cloud9. So on the Cloud9 front, I would call this like a 4 out of 5 quality move for them if they could pull it off. Now, this is all going to depend on 100 Thieves, of course, because they're the ones who have Huhi right now and who are in the finals and are, with a pretty decent chance to win another championship with him. They don't really have the need to move on from Huhi. Yes, they have Busio, who's probably the best support prospect. You can debate him versus Ayla in terms of support prospects. Ayla is a little more of a veteran player. He's played in the OPL. He's had a little bit of time in the LCS now. He's not really a prospect in the same sense, but if you say that he is, you can kind of hold up Busio and Ayla. Busio is way less experienced. I think he's got a lot more upside. I think he's going to be a star in the league in the future, and so you can see kind of a natural progression of, oh yeah, let's promote Busio for 100 Thieves. I don't think this split would be the right time to do it going into summer. 100 Thieves want to maintain all their momentum that they can and confirm for sure they're going to go to Worlds. Busio is still only one split of academy experience. Is that the player you want to bring up for summer split and say, it's got to work this split? Because if not, we might miss Worlds in NA. No, you give Busio another split in academy, and then you look at it for 2023 and say, how did that go? We'll go from there. So the likelihood of this happening for 100 Thieves, I think it would be like a 2 out of 5 quality move, because I think Huhi is still playing quite well, and your team is doing quite well, and you don't need to rush Busio along. You're not really gaining anything, I don't think, by promoting Busio for summer split. The likelihood of this happening because of it being a pretty poor quality move for 100 Thieves is like a 1.5 out of 5. Like, it's realistic, but it's not reasonable. So that's how I take it. There were a couple of players who had a lot of different suggestions for what should happen with them. We've just been talking about Ayla, so let's talk about him. Ayla to Cloud9 was one of the moves. Ayla to Golden Guardians was another one of them. A couple of people suggesting Ayla to TSM. So let's just kind of go at each of these. I will say that the likelihood of Ayla moving to some other team and being promoted into the LCS, I give it like a 3 out of 5. I can see it, that there are these teams and maybe some others who would be happy to bring Ayla up for summer if they didn't have to pay too much for him. You're not going to probably go and drop $1 million to buy him up from Team Liquid. I don't know what Team Liquid is asking, right? So I think it would be a good move for a lot of orgs. I don't know if it would be a good financial move, or if it's likely. I think it feels like more of a thing that could happen in October, November. That being said, for these three teams, how good of a quality move would it be? For Cloud9, I think they might look at Ayla and say, that might be an upgrade on Isles. Would it be a huge upgrade on Isles? I think it would be a relatively minor upgrade on Isles. I do think Ayla is a little better than Isles, but I don't think there's a huge difference between them. And so for the cost that you'd likely have to pay to bring Ayla in when you already have Isles, I'd call it like a 2.5, maybe a 3 if I'm generous move for Cloud9 in terms of quality. For Golden Guardians, I think you have Ole, and again, for the money it would cost you to bring in Ayla and the difference in performance in Ayla and Ole, I don't even know if there would be a difference in performance. I think Ole has flown kind of under the radar this split and played pretty well. So I think it'd be like a 3 out of 5 move for Golden Guardians. When you factor the cost in, it's more like a 2 out of 5. I don't think they're a great candidate to pay that money. TSM, on the other hand, if they are going to move on from Shenyi, and I'm not sure on that front, whether they try to ride it out with him and say, hey, things are improving, going in the right direction, and the team atmosphere and all that kind of stuff. If things are going well with Shenyi, then obviously they don't need to do this. If they've already decided we're replacing Shenyi, then this is more like a 4 out of 5 move for TSM, I think. Getting a quality domestic player that gives you flexibility and maybe other roster changes that you're considering making, I can see that one kind of working out. But overall, I'd say the likelihood of Ayla moving to some other team during this mid-season break, yeah, maybe a 3 out of 5, maybe a little less. The other player, and the player who probably was mentioned the most in these potential moves, was Tenacity. His name came up constantly, lots of different people. Tenacity is suggested to go to Cloud9. He suggested to go to CLG. A couple of people suggested him to go to Dignitas and replace Fake God. Suggested to go to FlyQuest. Suggested to go to TSM. It's just constant, like, Tenacity. And I totally understand why people want to see him in the LCS. You know, he's been playing kind of scrimming behind someday. There was the whole 6-man roster. He got one lock-in game and then, you know, has just been kind of a little ghost behind the scenes ever since. And people are intrigued by that, and naturally they should be. He's a really good prospect, we know, coming out of Academy last year, and the whole trajectory that he was following. I talked a lot about him last year and how good I felt about him and how he was one of the top prospects. So, yeah, I totally get why people are excited and see the potential in bringing this player out. And, hey, 100 Thieves aren't using him. They're probably likely going to be willing to move him if they get the right offer. So I get it. And in the teams themselves, assuming that Tenacity has been playing some of the scrims, they should have an idea from that whether they think he's still been, you know, he's still playing well this spring and is still developing. They'll have an idea whether he's worth acquiring better than the fans will, who are just, you know, getting nothing, except maybe if they look at it solo queue or maybe a little bit of champions queue. In terms of 100 Thieves feeling any, like, whether they should move him or need to move him, I don't think they're under any pressure. I think his value, I think if you go into summer, maybe they maybe they get a little bit more opportunity to play him in a few games in summer, depending what happens in the finals and all that. Whether they go to MSI, all those kinds of things. I don't think there's any real pressure for them to move him. There's no problem with them having him still in summer. And then you go into next off season and all the equations could change, right? So I think he's probably more valuable to the organization as an asset in the org than he is as whatever buyout money we get for him right now. Because of that, I think the likelihood is pretty low that he moves. And that also ties into what kind of a quality move would this be for all these different orgs that were named. For C9 and TSM, I don't think this makes sense. I don't think C9 need to bring in an outside top laner right now. You might be saying, they could run Tenacity, Blabber, Fudge, and then whatever they have in their bot lane. I don't think that's going to make your team better than keeping Summit. It might, but I think the risk level is pretty high for a player who's been unproven at the LCS level. And I think people who are saying replace Summit with anybody right now, which there's a little bit of that out there, I think that's really hyperbolic and a big overreaction. Maybe in November it makes more sense, right? You see what things look like, what the landscape is at that point. TSM, I think, again, Huhi has also been very badly underrated and is still worth keeping. So I don't think it makes a lot of sense for them as a mid-season change either. On the CLG, Dignitas, and FlyQuest front, I think there are two factors. One is that these three teams are probably unlikely to want to pay what they need to pay to get Tenacity, and they might not feel like they need him. Like these all have youngish, relatively inexperienced top laners who have the chance to keep developing, and I don't think you need to kind of necessarily move on from them. I know a lot of people will talk about Dignitas needing to move on from Fake God, so that would be the one where maybe they'd go for it. But they'd have to be able to pay for it, and Dignitas doesn't seem to be sending the vibes that they're willing to buy out big prospects from other orgs right now, especially not mid-year. So the quality of the move for any of these orgs would be a 3 or a 4, depending on their circumstances, but the quality of the move is going to be much higher in November, I would expect. The likelihood of it moving now, because Hunter Thieves are under no pressure to move him except for a great offer, probably a 1. So we're not hitting a lot of winners on likelihoods of these moves happening. But, if there are 10 1 out of 5 moves in terms of likelihood, maybe 1 or 2 of them will happen. We'll see. A couple of others that came up. One is Darshan being moved to Dignitas. So we were just talking about Fake God. Maybe they feel like they need to, okay, we've given Fake God a lot of leash. It hasn't worked out. We don't see the trajectory we are hoping for, and it's time to move on. Darshan would be a pretty good option for that. I think Darshan would be less expensive than getting Tenacity. Obviously, there's less of that long-term future upside because you know what you're going to get with Darshan, and I think he has been very good in Academy for years. For the time he's been spending on C9 Academy and before that, and I think he could be an LCS level top laner again. And probably is right now. I think he would be an improvement on Fake God. And so I would like the Darshan move for Dignitas probably more than Tenacity because it's more affordable. You don't have to feel like you're committing to a 3-year plan. And so I'd probably call it like a 3 out of 5 quality move, maybe a 4 out of 5, depending on the cost. I think it's like a 2 out of 5 likelihood, where this is something that, I can see that reasonably happening. Are they going to go for it? I might upgrade that to a 3 out of 5. Sure. Yeah, why not? I think they could. I think it probably won't be that expensive if they make an offer to Cloud9. The thing that might sink the move is, does Darshan feel happier continuing to develop in Cloud9 Academy, looking at his options in November, than he does moving to Dig right now on a low-end LCS team? I don't know. It would depend on his motivations. And finally, the last move I want to look at, and I find this one pretty interesting, is the idea of Spica joining Team Liquid. So, first of all, I think Spica's stock definitely sank this spring when TSM really, really struggled. But I think Spica is a great asset for an organization. He's a domestic jungler. He is recently an MVP, has a very high level of play that he can achieve, and I don't think TSM's issues this spring not much of that can be attributed to him. He did play below the level I kind of expected or hoped for him, but I think there's a lot of factors in that, and I'm not ready to say oh, Spica, he was a one split wonder and we're kind of done with him. No, I think he's shown a pretty steady, consistent level that he can play at a very high end. And obviously reuniting him with Bjergsen at TL would maybe kind of be exciting for that. They have some history in the TSM work together. But on the other hand, Team Liquid seemed pretty happy with Santorin. They did bring him back this past offseason as part of the super team they built. And why shouldn't they be happy with him? I think he's been playing pretty well, and they know exactly what he's going to bring in, and it's good enough to make them a championship contender. I think Spica, personally, I think would be a bit of an upgrade on Santorin, but is it enough to disrupt the risk, to bring in something you're less familiar with, to disrupt kind of the chemistry that you have in your team? I'm not sure if it's worth that risk. And it feels much more like an end-of-year move. This is another one that I think is, you look at November and say, hey, unless something has changed in the contract database recently, Spica is a free agent this coming off season. Go after him then, when you're not going to have to pay TSM a ton of money to get him out. You'll have more time to adapt your overall roster plan around him, or even if you don't change anything else, to kind of get the team to figure each other out. You've got a whole spring split to kind of throw away if it really doesn't work, and rejig for the summer run to Worlds, all that kind of stuff. So this is like a 1 out of 5 likelihood move for this mid-year offseason. And I think given the relative cost it would have, and relative to the potential increase in performance level, I think it'd be like a 2 out of 5. But you move this conversation to October, November, and all of that changes dramatically. So we'll have to see what happens between now and then. But it's one to kind of put on the back burner and think about, because I think a lot of people have kind of looked at that contract timeline and been like, I wonder. So we'll see what happens there. So thank you to everyone who sent in their ideas and their speculation about which moves might happen. I think this mid-year break could produce a decent amount of movement. I think there might be more movement in the LEC than there is in the LCS, but that can trickle down in different ways. So let's not forget that we're still in the middle of playoffs. We've got MSI to happen, but of course all the off-season stuff that happens mid-year is exciting as well. So looking forward to all that. Thanks again to everyone who tweeted, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching and supporting my content. I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and check out the channel memberships if you want to get access to custom emojis, special roles in the Oracle's Elixir Discord, and other perks.